Okay, welcome everybody to the second stream in our Unity's audio series. Once again, I'm super excited about it. Yet again, it's my second stream in my life. So yeah, quite exciting. Just a quick reminder, on the first stream, we talked about why, in my opinion, it will be way better to actually learn an game engine and not like, a middleware like it's usually recommended, but like I gave my reasons to start with a game engine. We talked about Unity's basic building blocks, the audio clip, the audio source, the audio listener, and the audio mixer. After that, we went into implementing and we talked about the cool feature the Unity's mixer has, which is like the editing play mode, which has allowed us to literally just mix and change parameters in real time as we play. For example, I'm playing and taking the music down and up. Yeah, cool feature. And last but not least, we talked about how important it is to keep your project really tidy and neat and keep everything clean and well structured when we're talking about the hierarchy and the folders and the naming. Which actually takes me to the beginning of that stream, because on the last stream I did a bit of a oopsie doopsie when I finished the stream, and I left my mixer asset in the asset folder, which is just an unnecessary mess and clutter in your eyes. So first of all, let's go to our audio folder, open a new folder, call it mixers, open that up, go back to the asset, and just drag and drop the mixer over there. Now, why is that important? Let's just like emphasize that again. We need a specific place or a folder to hold up all of our mixers, whether it's 1 or 100 mixer, it doesn't matter. But it's important for us to remember where we kept that mixer, and more importantly, to not create clutter and again, unnecessary mess for the other people that works on the same project. For example, I can see the generation settings and the post-processing profile here, or the saw. I think it's the sprites, the animations, I'm not even sure, but I don't need to see them. It's just unnecessary clutter, but this is how I got the project, so, let it be, but yeah. So, in this stream, we're gonna start implementing the locomotion SFX to our Red Runner character. And by that, we're gonna talk about prefabs, which is an essential and a very basic concept in Unity. We're gonna talk about animation events, and we're gonna deal a lot with C# and basic functions for audio with C#. Bear with me through that. If it sounds intimidating and you're like, oh no, Dean, I don't know nothing about C#, don't worry about it. I promise you that eventually everything will click and you will get it. And we're gonna go through the C# scripting step by step, and we're gonna touch very simple functions here. So don't worry about it. It's gonna be quite easy. So yeah, prefabs. So as you can see in my hierarchy here, the Red Runner game object and all of its child game objects are blue, which indicates that the Red Runner game object and all of its child game object with all of their components here are prefabbed. Now, prefabs in Unity are kind of a template or a model that lives outside our scene and inside our project. And let's talk about a scenario to make it clear of what it is. So almost in every game, we have several scenes or several levels, right? Let's say we have level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, including the boss level and special levels and all that. And throughout all those levels, we're gonna have the main character, which is the Red Runner. Now, we're probably not gonna change 90% of the Red Runner's features, game objects, or components, but we also don't want to recreate that same game object with all those components and features every single time in every scene. So what we can do is to prefab that Red Runner game object with all of its components and child game objects and just throw that prefabs in every new scene, and we will get the exact same game object with all of its child game objects and components, and then we can just duplicate it and use it. Another use case scenario, let's say, you know, we were in a first-person shooter, a zombie first-person shooter, and we have a lot of zombies, and usually, you know, there's just like the same zombies or just duplication of each other. We don't need to recreate all of those zombies game objects. We can just prefab one and throw it into the scene how many times we like, or we can instantiate that. Don't think about it too much, but yeah, you can instantiate game objects into your scene. The beauty about prefabs is that even though I have the mother prefab or the main prefab, every change I will do locally on the Red Runner inside my scene won't change anything in my main prefab. I can apply the changes to the main prefab, but it won't do it. But if I change one parameter on the main prefab, it will change it for all the other instances of that prefab globally. So it can really save up work for us. Now, for example, almost on every project I work, there were a prefab folder. So if you were ever looking for a prefab, you search for a prefab folder. Now, if I wanna, for example, prefab my audio game object with everything we created so far, because probably we're gonna have a music and ambience in our level as well, I can just simply drag and drop the audio, and now it's prefabbed. And just to make my point clear, I can open up that prefab, just double click it. And let's say I go to the audio, I can add an audio source here. And now if I go back to the scene, you will see the audio source pops up. Cool. Let's delete that because we don't need that. Cool. And yeah, it removed it. So why am I talking about prefab so much? First of all, again, as I said, it's a very basic and important concept in game engine and in building games. But also when we want to add locomotion sound effects, which are quite global, right? Like the whole footsteps and jumping and landing sounds, we're probably gonna need the same sound globally on each level. So I would probably want to work on the prefab and not on the game object here locally on that scene. Now, if I accidentally work on that scene, yes, I can apply the changes to the main prefab, but it's several extra clicks. So why to do it? It's a general good practice to add everything that is global to the actual prefab of the game. So you can either click the little arrow here, or you can just look for the prefab, double click it, and there it is, the prefab of the Red Runner. Everything we're gonna do here is gonna affect all the changes throughout the game. Any questions up so far? And we have a little delay, so I'll wait a bit. No, also give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, because maybe I'm just muted and no one can hear me, which will be awful. Okay, let's have the... Okay! Thank you. So everyone can hear me? That's great. So let's move on to adding locomotion. And let's look about the logic about how do I want to approach it of adding footsteps, jumping, and landing sound effects to my... Can't find some... Oh yeah, don't worry about it. Okay, to my Red Runner game object. So, in general, before you start any kind of process in game development, or if you want to implement some kind of sound effect somewhere, it's important to try to understand what will be the most efficient and simple way to do it. Now, it's not that simple. With experience, you will discover that certain things are not as easy as they seem. On the contrary, they're not as hard as they seem. But there's many ways to actually receive the same result. In our case, to have the footstep sound. Again, I can do it from many different places, but I think the most efficient way and accurate way, and accurate I mean, but having just one sound for a footstep each time a leg or a foot, the Red Runner foot, touches the ground, I want to have one sound effect, and I want to minimize as possible the bugs that can occur throughout this kind of process. So what I'm gonna do is gonna use an animation event. Now, we're gonna talk all about animation event after we're gonna touch the C# scripting here, but in general, we're gonna have an animation event. That's to say that specific event that happens on a specific frame of the running animation. We're gonna have that event to trigger a C# function we're gonna call the footstep audio, and we're gonna tell that function to play an audio source or to tell an audio source to play an audio clip. Now, if you haven't watched the first stream and you don't really understand what's audio source and audio clip, or they're not really sit in, do write down the question or watch the first stream. We're gonna heavily rely on the fact that audio source plays audio clip and how they play it and so on and so forth. So that's gonna be our logic. Once again, you can do it in ton of different ways, but each other way brings other bugs or other problems. They need more clicks to create, or they won't be as accurate as just calling a footstep from animation event. Okay. So let's go back and let's open our first C# script, which gonna handle the audio for our red runner. So you just click on Add Component, and let's type down red runner audio. Now, in general, it's crucial you'll get the naming right as you create a script, because if you want to change it afterward, it can create some problems and it's like a whole headache. It's solvable, but in an unnecessary headache. You can just look if you write it all down properly, and if you did, click on New Script, Create, and Add. But before we dive into the script, let it compile for a moment here. Cool. Let's go quickly to the asset folder. Unity created that script inside asset folder. And again, most projects will have a scripts folder as well. So let's drag our script into the scripts folder. And here, let's open a folder that will hold all the audio scripts. Wait, every time I'm gonna move it now, it's gonna be angry. Cool. Open it up and drag and drop. Let's go back to our prefab. Cool. And let's open up our red runner C# script. Just double click here on this tab. And yeah, Visual Studio opens up. Visual Studio is that extra component I asked you to install or our first stream. You need to have Visual Studio or some other what they call an IDE. I think it's an IDE. Just a software that you can write code inside and Unity can talk with. So let's make it a bit bigger so it makes it easier. We're fine with the camera. So every time you're gonna open a C# script, a new C# script in Unity, this is how it's gonna open up. This is just the basic default opening of a C# script. Now, let's go over the thing you need to understand, and let's talk about the stuff that don't think about it too much. Everything that lives between those curly brackets is gonna be actually the thing we're gonna write inside our script, which can also be referred to as class. So our class/script is called the red runner audio, and everything under those curly brackets will live inside our script and will be visible by our script. If I write anything here, C# or Visual Studio will tell me what are you talking about? And whenever I see that red squiggly line, it means error. And if I write anything here, same goes, this will just not be visible and we're gonna get errors. Now, that's not to say you can't write functions and create classes or all kind of other stuff. They're just not relevant for us at the moment, and it's more of a programmer's gymnastic stuff, but we don't need to think about it at the moment. All of those using system collection.generic and Unity engine are what they call namespaces. Now, think about it like that. We have Unity and we have Visual Studio. Those are actually two different software, but we open the script from Unity in Visual Studio. Those namespaces are actually collections that hold all kind of variables and stuff that Visual Studio can understand, references, that was the word they were looking for, references that Visual Studio can understand and talk with Unity. So for example, if I'll write down a Unity variable like audio source, then this C# script of Visual Studio will understand what I'm talking about, but that's because he is using those collections or those references that Unity already open up and adds to a script when we open a script from Unity. So don't delete those, we need those, And we're gonna actually add in future stream one extra namespace that will help us to access other audio features that Unity has, but they're not just basic, so they don't appear inside the Unity engine, or the Unity system collection. Cool. The next thing we're gonna see is our two functions that open up every time we open up a C# script. The first one will be the start function. Now, if you remember, on the first stream, I said that as the player starts the game or loads the game, like pressing play or pressing the button that starts a level, Unity gonna start two crucial functions. The first will be a wake that will be called before the start, and the second one will be the start function. Now, if you remember, our audio sources has the option to play on awake, which means that every audio source that is ticked to play on awake will be loaded into memory on awake and will start playing as we start the game. Start means that every sound or everything that is being called here between those curly brackets that lives under this function will be called as the game actually starts, which is the second function. But we're not gonna need it for now, we're not gonna use it, so let's just delete it. The second basic function will be the update function. Now this function is called once on every frame. That means that if our game is in 60 FPS, 60 frames per second, this function is gonna call whatever lives here 60 times a second, which might be useful for audio sometimes, but it's gonna create havoc if you wanna trying to create footsteps and those kind of sounds. So let's delete that thing as well and have a really clean C# script here. Now let's plan it. This is a Red Runner audio script, and we needed to tell audio sources to call audio. So we actually need the script to be aware of some kind of an audio source. And yeah, I know scripting is some kind of an abstract thing in the beginning, but just go with it. So what we're gonna do is actually declare an audio source, and you will see that the script already knows what I'm talking about because we have a good relationship right now, and he knows what I'm thinking about. We're BFFs, and he can complete me. And you will see we have the same relationship with your C# script, C#, Visual Studio. Sorry, never mind. Totally, wait, sidetrack it here. Sidetrack. So I declared an audio source, and now I need to give it a name to help you, C# or Visual Studio to reference it whenever we're gonna call it. So I'm gonna call it locomotion. So it's locomotion source. Now each time I finish a sentence in C#, I need to add a semicolon. That's actually telling Visual Studio this is a sentence, and the next thing you're gonna go over will be a new sentence. So make sure you add your semicolons. A lot of errors occur because of missing semicolons. It's a known thing. So right now, inside our code, we declared an audio source and we called it locomotion source. And I want this audio source to appear in my inspector in Unity. So I'm gonna add something that's called public. Cool, let's save that up and go back to Unity to see what it did. Great, let's go back to our prefab. Cool. And right now, you can see that under my Red Runner audio script, inside the Red Runner inspector, I have a tab that I can drag in an audio source, and that audio source tab is called locomotion source. So now I can just open up an audio source, and I can simply drag and drop the audio source inside that tab. Cool. So what we actually did, we actually opened the script, we declared an audio source, and we called it a locomotion source, and every time we're gonna call the locomotion source from this script, it would know to actually regard to this specific audio source we just literally drag and dropped. Now, this is a cool thing about public, that we can actually see it in the inspector, but it has also the feature of being public, which means that other scripts or other classes or other game objects can access that audio source. That means to activate it. Now, in our case, it's not gonna be really problematic, but it's a general good practice to keep things that are not supposed to be public as public, because we don't want different variables to change them or call them because of some kind of unforeseen bug. So the other function we can use is the private function, which means now the only place we can access that audio source, which is called locomotion source, will be from inside that class. No other class or script can access that audio source unless we're gonna do some scripting gymnastics, but for now, it's safe. The problem is that right now we cannot see it in the inspector, and we cannot easily drag and drop our audio source. So what we can do is kick out that private as well and write down serialized field. Now that's gonna keep our audio source private, but it's also gonna make it visible inside our inspector, and it's already remembered our audio source. What an amazing friend this Redrunner audio script is. So right now, we referenced an audio source called locomotion source, and it's highly crucial for me to get the connection between the variables and their names, because usually, again, from I'd see from programmers, they will give very vague names to their variables, like they will call audio source just source, or audio source with a small a letter, which is very generic, which for, again, programmers can work, but for us sound designers who want to have a more of a neat or a clear way of working, let's give it a proper name. And again, this audio source is in charge of our locomotion sounds. So we have a variable called audio source, called locomotion source, and it will call this audio source specifically. Now, the next thing we want to do is create the function that will actually call that locomotion source and will tell it to play an audio clip. So we can just type down void and open a function that will be called footsteps audio. Open up those parentheses, click enter, and curly brackets. Now, there are different types of functions. One of them will be the void. Don't think about it too much. Just for now, it's important for you to be familiar with the fact that this is the most basic I don't know if the most, you know what, I'll be careful with my words, but this is a very basic syntax in scripting when it comes to writing down functions. Now, after every function you open, you have to add those parentheses. Again, don't think about it too much for now. Just make sure you add them. And you just add those curly brackets, which tell Visual Studio that everything that lives here is associated under this function and will be called as this function is gonna be called. So what do we want to do? We want to call this audio source, and we want to tell it, hey, audio source, play whatever audio clip you have when this is called. So we're just gonna type down locomotion source, because we want to call that audio source, dot play. And you can see Visual Studio already guessing what we want to do, because, again, very basic function here. And this is just the basic snippet of how you're gonna call an audio source and tell it to play from code. So right now, whenever we're gonna call this footstep audio function, it's gonna call that audio source and it will tell it play. And because it's a function, you add those parentheses, and whenever it's called, this audio source will play whatever audio clip he has here. Now, let's associate an audio clip with this audio source. So let's go to our audio folder here. By the way, note I locked the inspector here because I want this to be visible. Otherwise, if I'll click or keep it unlocked, once I'll start clicking other stuff, it will just disappear and it's annoying as hell. So make sure you lock it, and let's open up a new folder. Keep everything nice and tidy. We're gonna call it Redrunner. Open it up. Another new folder. I wish Control-Shift-N would work here, but it opened a new game object, another folder. Let's add locomotion. And let's take my folder for all of my stuff now. All of my sound effects, sorry. Go to locomotion, and we're gonna need footsteps, we're gonna need land, and we're gonna need jump. Let's drag it in. Once again, it's not a sound design, it's a sound design implementation stream. So it's just assets from Soundly I dragged in. And let's open up this folder and take our first footsteps and place it here. Now, of course, we don't want it to play in awake, because if we're gonna play on awake, we're just gonna hear a footsteps place. Very stupid. We don't need it. So tick off the play on awake. But right now also nothing calls it. And let's talk about animation events. Now, animation events help us to call functions we create in C#, like the footsteps audio function, and call them from animation. So in that matter, we want to call the animation of the red runner actually running, and whenever the frame of the foot hitting the ground is being played, we want to call that function. So if you don't see that tab, you can just click Ctrl+6 or Command+6, or if you want to do it the old way, just go to Window, Animation, and open up the Animation tab. Now, right now, you don't see nothing because this animation tab will only show animation relates to specific game objects. So if we're gonna click on the red runner, which already has all its animator and all of its animations because it was set up, by the programmers and animators, we're gonna see the different animations that belongs to the red runner. So we can click here on this arrow and we'll see all the different animation. Now, we would want to look for the new run animation. And now if we jog the cursor over the timeline, we can actually see the animation occur. And if we press play, we would actually see the loop of the animation. Cool. Now over here, you see those little white stripes? Those are actually animation events that were placed probably by the animators, I believe, that actually supposed to call the particles. So whenever the red runner runs, you will see some dust behind him. But when I checked it, I think they placed it one frame before the foot actually touches the ground. See, this is where it touched the ground as I see it. Now, maybe because there's a certain delay with the particles, maybe because it didn't really work, they just take it one frame before the actual footstep and it will be synced. I don't know, but this is where I'm gonna place my animation event. So click over here to add an animation event. Cool, and now I need to pop my camera to the left side so you can see everything properly. Cool. And let's release the lock here. And if I'll click on this animation event, you can see that this function option open here. And if I'll open that menu, I can dial all the way, where is my, wait. Maybe I didn't save. I didn't save. Okay, let's go back. Happens a lot. Didn't save my script. And let's go back to the same place. New run. Click on this animation event. And yeah, now I can see my footstep audio function right here in the bottom of the menu. All of those other functions relates to, red runner's scripts for other matters, but this is from our brand new audio C#, which is placed on the red runner. If it was placed, by the way, on some other game object, we won't be able to see it. We need to put our script on the actual game object with the animation on it. So yeah, let's click on that footstep audio. And because we have a one footstep here and a one footstep here, let's add another animation event and call the same footstep audio. Ctrl+S, like we didn't do on the Visual Studio. Let's go back and press play. But let me make sure we're on mute here so we can actually properly hear it. And let's hope it all works. Play and all right. We can hear the footsteps playing beautifully in our game. Let's actually see that coming through. Yes, it's coming through the OBS, so I bet you can hear it. Cool. So even though, it's just a very repetitive footsteps, it doesn't sound much, it doesn't sound so believable. We're playing an audio, or more accurately a footstep audio. Whenever the red runner is running, it's always in sync with the animation. So whenever the red runner is gonna catch some speed, we're still gonna stay in sync. So the red runner's speed, it doesn't matter for us, we're still good. And we did it with minimum clicks, minimum effort, and no bugs whatsoever, even though we're gonna have some bugs that we're gonna address. Cool. So let's make sure we got this process clear. So the red runner is running, the player is pressing the D or the A buttons on his keyboard, and he's actually activating an animation called the new run animation. When it happens, we're calling the specific animation event. This animation event is being triggered and calling the footstep audio function we just called. This footstep audio function called that locomotion source or audio source, which is associated with this audio source that has the audio clip in it. And by that, we're creating the footsteps. Cool. Any questions up so far? Thanks, Nimiya. Very clear. Cool. So we're all good. All right. So right now, if we're actually calling, an audio source, which is playing the footsteps audio clip, is cool, but it's not very efficient when you think about it, because right now we have one audio source that's gonna play one audio clip. And yeah, as you probably guessed, I dragged different kind of footstep sound and I wanna play randomly. And I want to change them dynamically, and I don't want the audio source to be associated with one audio clip, because, I can have 4 SFX for my running sounds, and 3 for my jumping, and 1 for my landing, and I already need like 8, audio sources here, which is not efficient just to add all those audio sources, like tons of audio sources. Why not just use one audio source, which is called locomotion source, and use it for all of my locomotion sound? Now, what it actually means is that we need to change the audio clip that is being called dynamically from code. So let's do that. So first of all, let's click none here and make sure we have no audio clip here. Now, just like with the audio source, we need to tell this Visual Studio script or this class, hey, let's refer some kind of an audio clip. So first of all, let's do serialized field. And because Visual Studio is so smart, I'm going to place audio. It's like audio source and like audio clip, and he will understand what I'm talking about. And let's call it run clip. Semicolon. Cool. So right now, I declared an audio clip. But inside my function, my footsteps audio function, I wanted to tell the audio source what clip to play. So whenever this function is going to be called from an animation event, I want to tell the audio source, hey man, that's your clip that you're going to play, and then play it. So I'm going to type down locomotion source, and I'm going to say dot clip equals run clip. And you can see once again, Visual Studio already completing me, then no problem here. So now, whenever we're going to call this function, it's going to call this run clip, which was whatever audio clip I'm going to associate there, and then the audio source is going to play that audio clip. So let's go back and let's lock it. And you can see that run clip slot opened here. Let's drag and drop here and let's see if it all works. Let it load, compile, play. And yeah, cool. So right now, I'm changing dynamically the audio clip that is being played from a single audio source. Cool. That's a really big step forward, because if you remember, on the first stream, we talked about priorities and that audio sources have priorities because there's only a certain amount of voices you can play inside Unity. The default is 32. Now, if I'm gonna have one audio source per audio clip, I'm gonna fill it up pretty much quite quickly, and each audio source that is being loaded, or each loading of audio clip into a new audio source, is gonna cost us some memory. So we're already starting to think in a more efficient, clean, and an optimized way here when we're building our audio logic for our game. Now, yes, I know it's very basic steps, but it's gonna cover, like, again, the most basic chunk that later on we're gonna build on. So right now we're calling an audio clip from an audio source that's only associated with the running. But if you think about it, we can open also a function for the jumping animation and the landing animation and call that audio clip to play from the same audio source whenever that function is being called. So let's do it quickly and see how everything we talked about today is quite easy to create. So what we actually need, we need more audio clips. So let's just duplicate that one and call it a jump clip. Cool. Duplicate it again and call it a land clip. And now we need to create the same type of function, but just call it jump or land audio. So let's create void jump audio, parentheses, curly brackets, locomotion source dot clip equals jump clip. Again, Thank you, Visual Studio, for annoying me. And then locomotion source, play. We need to do the exact same thing, but only now. Change it to land. Also change it to land here. And we're good. We have two different functions, like three different functions, sorry. Ooh, opa, I need to close the Slack, sorry. That will call a different audio clip from the same audio source based on the animation that is gonna be played. So let's go back to our inspector. We're locked the inspector, that's good. Let's go to the jump, add our jump sound here. Let's go to the land, add our land sound here. And what we have left to do, we need to call it from the animation. So let's click on our red runner. Again, unlock this animation. Check for the grounded animation, which actually tells when the red runner landed. Add an animation event and look for the land audio. Cool. Let's go for the jump animation whenever the actual red runner is jumping. Animation event and jump audio. And same goes for the animation that is being active during his run, if you're jumping during his run, and call the same function. So right now, I'm expecting that whenever I land, I will hear like a landing sound. Whenever I jump, I'll hear a jumping sound. And whenever I run, I'll hear a running sound from one audio source. Let's click play. You will hear the landing sound. It's going to be beautiful. Listen. I love those farts in those kind of games. And let's run. Jump. Great. Now you can probably already see several annoying stuff that some of them we're gonna address in the next stream and one of them we're gonna address now. First of all, nothing changes here. Like I can see what audio clip is actually being played. Now, right now, yeah, it's quite obvious that jump, land, run. Yeah, it's quite obvious. But if we'll have like, 5 variations for each sound and we want to check if those variations are actually being called, if that's the same footsteps or what's happening there, we need to make it visible or use some kind of a debug mechanism that we're going to talk about it now. Other bugs we already have is that the transition between the animation kind of like, crossfades between them. So you can hear the running footsteps as he jumps. You see, you can really literally hear a footstep in the air. We're going to take care of that next stream, don't worry. But let's address to how to actually debug and understand what's happening in my code. Yeah, no question, so let's do it now. So before we dive into it, you should be familiar with the console. Now this is where Unity gonna print out errors, warnings, or everything gonna tell it to print out. As you can see, there's some kind of issue with the Facebook SDK or something. So whenever I press play, it's gonna tell me, hey man, there's some kind of error, but yeah, analytics, I'm a sound designer, not a how do you call them? DevOps or whatever, backend. So like their problem, click clear. You can actually also make sure you're clear on play here. So every time you press play, you clear out all the messages on the console. But let's print out in the console the name of the audio clip that is being played whenever it's being called. So inside each of our function, I want to tell Unity Debug.Log. And that's the basic function, log. And that's the basic function to tell Unity to print out whatever we want in the console whenever this function is gonna be called. So I want Unity, to print out the locomotion source clip. Cool. And I have an error, I guess, because this is why. Yes. So right now, whenever this function is gonna be called, it's gonna call the specific audio clip, which is the run clip. It's gonna play it through our audio source, which is the locomotion source, and it's gonna print out to the console which clip we have played. Now let's Control C, let's copy paste, over here and over here and make it tidy by deleting those spaces. Control S, go back to Unity. And And right now, when we'll play, we won't see the audio clip name change here, but I'll see whatever audio clip is being called. So you will already, let's clear that out, hear the fart sound or the landing sound. Cool. And as I will run, you will see it being called and it will count them up. The reason it's counting it is because I'm on collapse here. I ticked the collapse tab, but if I'll take it off, then it will just show it, in a row of what happened or being called. But it feels like a mess. I don't want it. So collapse. Cool. One last thing. This is not the jumping sound I like. It's not my style. Let's take this jump audio clip, the ruler clip. This is more cartoonish. It's more how I like it to actually sound. Let's play. Opa. Cool. Now, it's actually giving me a great example of what we're gonna talk first thing on the next stream. You hear the ruler jumping sound getting cut? This is because we're using the play function and not the play one-shot function. Again, two really basic playing functions in Unity, which we're gonna talk about next stream and dive deep to understand the pros and cons of each and when we're gonna use it, like each of them. But right now, the audio source.play, or in our case, the locomotion source.play, is the most basic way to actually call an audio source from script. It has its own features, so one of the effects of it is if hearing the sound audio clips getting cut whenever a new audio clip is being played. It won't be caught if there's no footstep sound. Cool. Next stream, we're also gonna associate the output dynamically. So whenever we're calling the footstep, the jumping or the landing, we're gonna change the output it's gonna take from the mixer. It's gonna route it, into the mixer. So right now we're not gonna do it. It's gonna happen on the next stream. Questions on everything we touched here? So Sure Audio asks, how do you see all the footsteps you use and remove them if you can only see one of them in the inspector? What do you mean? How do I see all the footsteps? Like how do I add more footsteps? Or how do I add and remove them from the actual tab in the inspector? There's delay, so it's gonna take time. Okay, so that will be a way more elaborate system to actually add and remove dynamically audio clips from the tabs. So we're not gonna touch it here. We're gonna touch it in a way more advanced stream because it's gonna be real more complicated coding. But my plan for this specific system would to add runner footstep 1, but I'm also gonna add an array of footsteps like 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is gonna live inside this script and also always gonna be here, but the C# script is gonna call them randomly. So I'm not gonna call one, remove that, and add another. I'm gonna add all the audio clips I want, and I'm gonna choose randomly between them. You can actually associate audio clip and dump it and call another audio clip, but it will be way more of a script in gymnastic than actually create an array that we're gonna touch on the next stream. Is that clear? Oh, cool. So, any more questions, or I'm gonna talk about what's gonna happen in the next stream? It's up for now. So, on the next stream, we're gonna make our system way more elaborated, and by that I mean being able to call different audio clips and randomize their features like the pitch and their volume. So whenever we're calling just 4 assets, every time the asset is gonna be called, it's gonna be sounding a bit different and create a way more diverse and rich audio to our game, which is a really basic, again, in the sound design for gaming, because we don't want to dump in like, 10 or 15 assets for each locomotion type, like for running, jumping, or landing. That will be really not efficient optimization-wise. We want to use as few of an assets as we can use, but play with their parameters in real time to create, as much variation as we can, and the illusion that we have more assets than we actually have, which will keep our game way more optimized. So we're gonna do that. So like, yeah, sure, we're gonna just call it from an array of sounds. We're going to randomize their parameters. We're going to dynamically change the routing of our groups. We're also going to talk about the difference between audio source.play and audio source.play one shot, and when do we want to use each one. And we're going to solve our annoying bug in which some audio clips played or audio sources being called when they should not be called from the animation. So thank you everyone for joining this stream. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure for me. Again, feel free to contact me if you have any questions regarding this stream, whether it's through LinkedIn, Facebook, Elwiggles, if you're from there, or my website, however you like. And also, if you want this Red Runner game for your Unity cleared out of any audio so you can implement your own sounds following this stream and how I do it, or in your however you want to do it, feel free to contact me and I will send you the zip file and you can just download it and play it in your Unity version. So once again, thank you everyone for joining, and I'll see you in the next stream, which will be declared soon. Bye-bye.